To present the Literarian Award for Outstanding Service to American Literature is Ira Glass. Ira Glass is the host and producer of the public radio program This American Life. The show had its premiere on Chicago's public radio station, WBEZ, in 1995, and is now heard on more than 500 public radio stations each week. In March 2007, the television adaptation of This American Life premiered on Showtime to critical acclaim. Under Glass's direction, the show has won the highest honors for broadcasting and journalistic excellence, including the Peabody and DuPont Columbia Awards, as well as the Edward R. Murrow and the Overseas Press Awards. Ira Glass.
A few weeks ago, Terry Gross was interviewing a writer about something in his latest book. The writer was Shalom Auslander, and his book was about leaving the ultra-Orthodox Jewish life that he was raised in. They were talking about this moment in the book right before he quit that life. At that point in the story, he's still wearing the big hat and the black clothes, but he embarked on this brief, secret binge of sin, going to a prostitute, and if that weren't bad enough, to McDonald's. Terry Gross says to him, "Can I confess to you what this reminded me of? When I was reading about you going to the prostitute and binging on unkosher fast foods and stuff." "Your life?" Shalom Auslander asks. Terry Gross says, no. What I was thinking of was the 9/11 hijackers, who apparently, before getting on the planes to ram into the towers and the Pentagon, went to these strip clubs. That's what I was thinking about. Not because I expected you to fly into a building, just because of that sense of this kind of pent-up feeling that's not allowed to be expressed, that kind of sneaks out in ways that are sometimes pretty sordid, because it's the only sneaky way you can get them out. And then, this interview takes this incredibly bare, goes to this incredibly bare moment. It takes this turn when this writer confesses to her this thing that's not in his book at all. That when he started reading about the hijackers, he made the same connection between him and them. That this definitely did not seem like something that he usually talked about in public. He says in the interview, "I did see that, and I thought, I wasn't that far. Not just the strippers, but I mean the flying planes into buildings. Believing what I believed, if enough people had told me that my people were suffering for a certain reason, and this was not only cool with God, but was something that he wanted, and I had no other options and whatever else was going on, I'm not sure I wouldn't be there. I think I can get my head around that. I watched and heard about all those terrorists, and I got a little frightened." And when the news programs finally started showing pictures of madrasas and seeing these little kids, shuffling back and forth with these books in front of them, well, it's not that different than Yeshiva of Spring Valley was, is the yeshiva he went to in upstate New York. Different books, different dress code, but other than that, everything was pretty much the same. Terry Gross says, there are going to be people who are going to be very angry hearing you say that and completely disagree with you, don't you think? He says, sure. And then they talk about that. It was great radio, of course. But let this writer do something that is really all too rare. It created this space for him to leave aside the half dozen anecdotes and ideas that any writer carries with him on the road as he publicizes his work, and let him have a moment where he actually discusses the work, really discusses it. One day later, Terry Gross got into a discussion with another writer, Stephen Colbert of The Colbert Report, about his religious convictions. His religious convictions seemed deep and sincere, and they talked about what he says to his kids about hell. The next day after that, half-hour discussion about the subprime lending crisis. In this one little 3-week period, the 2 weeks that followed, she got the jazz trumpeter and film composer Terence Blanchard to confide very politely, very respectfully, that when he writes film scores for Spike Lee uses all the melodies in places that Blanchard does not intend, so that melodies written for major characters are used for minor characters, incidental melodies become the main theme of the movie. She had equally revealing conversations with Junot Diaz, Oliver Sacks, Alice Sebold, the actors Mark Ruffalo and Steve Carell, Dave Grohl of Nirvana and the Foo Fighters. She spent an hour talking about the oil politics of the Caspian Sea. She got Valerie Plame to respond to a variety of charges that her critics have posed. And then when all the serious part of the interview was done, Terry Gross also managed to ask Plame this about her time as a spy. Terry asked, "You know, in spy movies, when women agents are recruited, they're often asked to seduce their target in order to get intimate and therefore find out the target's secrets. Was that ever expected of you in the CIA?" The thought of doing any one of those interviews is daunting. To do all of them in a 3-week span at the level that Terry Gross does is nearly unthinkable. There's an old Jewish joke where there are two old men at a Catskills resort and they're complaining about the food. "The quality's terrible," says one of the guys. "And such small portions," says the other. I think about that joke sometimes when I listen to Terry Gross, because she's the exact opposite. Astonishing quality, mind-bending portions. Listeners, notice this. I saw on Wikipedia this week that somebody wrote that something that certainly cannot possibly be true, but is so flattering to have somebody write about you. They wrote, "Terry Gross," it says, "reads at least 1 book a day." Being a great interviewer shares this with being a great editor or a great writer. A lot of it just simply comes down to your taste and judgment about what's interesting. Terry Gross has great editorial judgment. She chooses well. When to challenge somebody, when to move on, when to do biography, and when and how to talk about the ideas in the work. She works with a team of producers who are unsurpassed anywhere, whose judgment is just as keen as hers. There's a tone to her show that is unlike anything else on radio, recognizable if you're flipping the dial, even before you hear her voice. The silence around her and the interviewees feels very present. Like here, at last. Here's a quiet space where interesting things are going to be said. Scores of writers each year are grateful for that space, to talk about their work, to help them reach and connect with an audience. It doesn't just nourish the business of books to have this place. It nourishes the feeling inside you that makes you love books in the first place, that made everybody in this room want to read or write or publish. That's a service. That's a huge service to writers and book companies and millions of us who listen each week. And I am pleased and proud to present the Literarian Award for Outstanding Service to the American literary community to Terry Gross.